I will say in this episode, I don't know why they chose to give Zach like a bit of a victim edit or a pity edit, talking about how he doesn't have anyone to rely on in the house and nobody likes him. He made that happen. What up, everybody? Wanted to do another recap of Fear Factor House of Fear episode 4. Another pretty damn good episode. You know, it's not just a house of fear, it also is a house full of strategy, which is why I am enjoying this season overall. We ended the last episode with Blake kind of being a target for at least Ethan and Dida and maybe Chelsea because they were in this four-person alliance with Tyler, who it looked like Blake had the big idea to pull Tyler into that elimination in episode 3. Even though Lance was kind of the brains behind the operation, Lance has gotten a mastermind edit this entire season so far. Someone in my last video last week for episode 3 was asking how Lance is a puppet master. And he is because he is doing moves without getting the blood on his hands. Like all of the blood was on Blake's hands in the last episode. So not only did Lance protect Blake, which has been his MO since the beginning, but Lance also got Tyler out, which was a big target he was after in that episode. And then no blood is on his hands with Dida and Ethan because it all falls black onto Blake. So coming into this episode, Ethan and Dida were really acting like Blake chose to be a villain with the whole not taking their deal to not pull in Tyler last week. I still think Ethan and Dida's deal was an atrocity. Like it didn't make any sense for Blake to take that deal because with that deal they were still going to put him into the end game elimination last week. So like they want him to go into the elimination this week. We're gonna put you in, but you know, don't put in Tyler. I don't know. I just don't think that's a good deal. Like you have to go in anyway. So Blake had every reason to screw them over. And Blake has his own alliance. He is aligned with Lance. They have this alliance with Damienne and Danny. And Damienne and Danny also gave Blake a foot rub during the beginning of this episode. I guess to, in a way, solidify their alliance or just to make sure Blake keeps them safe and knows they're aligned with Blake, perhaps. I think it was more Damien's idea than Danielle's for that foot rub. Rodney in this episode decided he was going to put his ex-detective skills to the test by doing some spying. He really thought he was the second coming of Tony Vlachos from Survivor by doing some spying, but there was no spice shack built to be able to do this out in the wilderness. He had to try and do this from upstairs on the balcony, and he ended up getting caught by Ethan. So Rodney's whole detective strategy not really working out for him here. And I think it was at that point during the edit I thought Rodney might be in trouble today. So our main challenge to decide who our leaders are, to decide who goes into the elimination, was a challenge where they had to get dragged by a horse. Apparently this challenge was to test the fear of animals and the fear of shoulder dislocations, which I don't know if that's a real fear. Do people just fear dislocating their shoulder? I feel like calling that a fear is just saying it's an excuse to say you might get injured in this challenge. They had to be pulled by horses and land the furthest in the scoreboard out into the field, but they had to land the highest without going over that scoreboard. So Lance didn't love this challenge because apparently he was bucked off of a horse when he was a kid. But at first, Lance conquered his fear, which you kind of know by now during the edit, at least most of the time. I think there was one episode where it didn't really happen. But when people start talking about their fears and they relay it into the challenge that they're going to do, it usually means that person has a good chance of winning one of the challenges on the show or on that specific episode. So Lance did get the furthest, but he didn't end up winning the challenge though. It was they decided that the winners this challenge would be either just one man and one woman, because so far only women have been eliminated in the first 3 episodes, and Lance and Jayleen had a conversation about that before the challenge, about how all the girls are going home and they want to make sure a girl doesn't go home this week. That could be an issue with the challenges, that the challenges are specifically looking like the men are winning this season. So maybe they need to fix that if they do get a second season, so that the men don't have the advantage in their elimination challenges. But I mean, they haven't been that unfair. If they had the gross drinking challenge, I feel like that is bad for both sexes. But there has been some physical challenges too, I suppose. Anyway, back to this episode's challenge. Dida ended up scoring the same as Lance, but they had to measure who got further, and Dida got a few inches further, so he went on the men's side. And then Damienne scored an 8, by far did the best out of the women today. So Damienne had her big celebration afterwards, both shocked and surprised, but excited that she would actually be a leader this round. Ethan outscored Dida, I forgot. So Dida outscored Lance, and then Ethan outscored Dida, so it ended up being Ethan and Damienne who end up being our leaders this round, and they are in opposite alliances. So we had to see how those two would do with their strategy in this episode. I think Damienne is not exactly a strategist, I would go so far as to say. I don't feel like she had a strategy coming into this leader chat with Ethan. I think Ethan had more strategies than she did. I think Damien's big thing was that she wanted to keep Lance safe, which again goes back to why I think Lance is the mastermind this season so far. People want to keep him safe. Damienne is another example of Lance having another week where nobody is really looking at him, even though he is pulling a lot of strings behind the scenes. He's been a very fun player to watch this season. He is part of the reason why this show has a lot of strategy so far. And I mean, I kind of feel like he could be a favorite to win, but there's definitely some other favorites, even like Zach, who I guess we'll talk about here in a second. Ethan and Damien's big idea is to pull both Lance and Dida into their discussion for who they should throw into the end game, because it is just like episode 3, where whoever is put into the end game gets to pull three people, drag them to hell with them. They seem to really like that twist, and I guess it does add another element of strategy, and it doesn't give too much power to the leaders to decide. Just, the leaders just deciding who goes into elimination is kind of a lot of power for the leaders each week. So I do like that they added that twist. Ethan's big plan is to try and be big brained like Lance last week, even though he doesn't know it was all Lance's idea, and is to throw in Dida so that Dida can pull who he wants in, and basically they're trying to eliminate Blake. At first, it didn't seem like Dida was on board with that idea, because he shouldn't be. I don't think you should ever want to volunteer yourself to go into an elimination. To me, that will never be good strategy. So that was the big plan. One more thing I do want to touch upon before we get into the elimination is that suddenly they are throwing Rob and Jayleen's showmance back into the show. It was not really a thing in episode 2 and 3. It was a big thing in episode 1. But apparently Rob and Jayleen still have their flirtmance going on. And I think it is more of a flirtmance than a full-on showmance at this point. But they had everyone watching them today. And people are saying that Rob just won't go in for a kiss with Jayleen. That's what they were watching for, to see if he did. And he didn't. But the fact that they have circled back to this Rob and Jayleen showmance at least a little bit leads me to believe it will become more of a thing again as this season continues to go along. So Dida was put into the elimination, and he decided to put in Blake, Zach, and Rodney with him. So Ethan and Dida were definitely in on wanting to keep the women safe this week after they went out back to back to back in the first 3 episodes. The fear today was a gross challenge where they had to deal with germs and dirty water, and weird things would drop and they'd have to catch it. And if they catch the weird thing like a cow tongue, then they have to go into this big dumpster basically full of water and gross things and find the matching item. So Zach finished very quickly. I will say in this episode, I don't know why they chose to give Zach like a bit of a victim edit or a pity edit, talking about how he doesn't have anyone to rely on in the house and nobody likes him. He made that happen. Zach was our person in the first couple episodes who had our biggest potential to be a villain. And now, a few episodes later, they want to try and give him a pity edit. Don't really think that hit. The whole woe is me, nobody in this house likes me, or I don't have anyone to rely on is kind of his own doing. His social game is not good. But he has shown us that he doesn't have a lot of fears, for one, but he also he tries to be a trickster. But he finished first. Dida was struggling at first. It looked like Ethan and Dida's plan was backfiring. It did fail in getting out Blake because he finished before Dida and Rodney. But Dida did make a comeback and he did beat Rodney in the end. And Rodney is eliminated. Blake in confessionals is saying that Ethan and Dida did not get their revenge on him, and they didn't. Lance is learning that was right about Rodney because earlier in the episode he guessed that Rodney was a detective. More solid work from Lance this season. He is just on it. Every single thing, Lance has his eyes on this win. He is the puppet master so far. And now Zach is mad at Ethan and Dida for always throwing him into elimination. I feel like Ethan and Dida have put themselves as looking like they are trying to run the game. And some people might actually think they are running the game. But this is once again an example of why Lance is the mastermind this season. Nobody suspects that he's pulling strings, and he is. But now Dida and Ethan are getting a lot of flack because they are playing, pretty balls to the wall too, but their game is really out in the open compared to the secretive game of Lance's. So another solid episode of this season. I really am enjoying the strategy aspect. Don't know if it will get a season 2, but I'm going to keep watching this season.